All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sales Assembly Study Break. I'm Christina Brady, President of Sales Assembly. Want to give a shout out to Vidyard, our sponsor. And today I'm here with Devin Reed. Devin, tell us who you are and what you do.
Yes, I'll give you the short answer of who I am. That can be a deep question, but so I'm a sales pro turned content strategist. So I was in sales for 6 years in the trenches as a full cycle AE. Was the second sales hire at Gong in 2017. And about a year ago, I moved over to the content strategy side of things, where I'm now responsible for thought leadership, content marketing, and social media.
That gives you a lot of unique experience to draw from, and that's exactly what everyone needs. So as you're thinking through your Rolodex of different areas where you could lend in and help, what would be 1 to 2 really tactical tips that you would give to revenue producers right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, today of all times, we're doing our best to really kind of comfort buyers, right? And show them that it's okay to move forward. There's enough chaos in the world. We want to provide a sense of understanding. And one of the tools that sales pros use all the time, marketers do it too, is social proof, right? It could be a case study. It could be a reference call. It could be the logos on your website. And so social proof is something that salespeople have been doing for a long time. It's part of almost every sales cycle. But what we found at Gong Labs, which is our research team where we look at different trends and insights based on our user data, web conferencing calls, phone calls, and emails, is that social proof can actually backfire in a pretty big way. And so we analyzed 40,000 sales opportunities, and we found that there's actually a decrease in close rates when sales pros use social proof, actually 22% lower close rates. And it jumps all the way to 47% lower close rates if it's done on the first call, which is kind of brain melting, right? It doesn't really make sense. It doesn't add up. It's counterintuitive. And so when we looked into it, what we realized is that sales pros oftentimes use social proof in a way that backfires. And here's what I mean by that. What you're doing in social proof is you're trying to kind of create a group, right? There's other people like you with the same problems that use our solution, right? So you should join them. But what happens is they actually create a group that alienates their buyer. And so here's an example, right? If you're selling to an SMB company, sub 200 employees, but you lead with them and you say, hey, Devin, we sell to Google, Facebook, and Microsoft. Well, immediately what happens is you've built a tribe or a group and you've put it over there, but I don't see myself in that group because I don't really relate to those companies, right? I don't have 10,000 plus global employees. And so that's the reason why it backfires and actually alienate buyers. And so if you like, I can share a couple of tips on what to do instead.
That is exactly what I was going to ask, because when I think back to a lot of just the early on training that I was either back in my AE days or that I've seen, that is a really common tactic for people to use. But to your point, I think there's not enough research on the front end to do it correctly. So people drop big names thinking it's going to sound impressive. And instead their buyers are like, well, we're not even competing with them. So if they're buying this, then you're probably not a fit for us. And so I think this is a really good thing to think about. So yeah, go one level deeper.
Perfect. And yeah, that's exactly it, right? We use our big enterprise logos like, hey, we sell to Amazon, we sell to these companies. It's good for credibility, right? It shows that you're like a big deal, I guess. But it doesn't really work for one-on-one deals. And so yeah, what to do instead is instead of listing 2 or 3 companies, list 6. Because what you want to do is kind of incite that FOMO feel, right? Just like you said, it can be people they directly compete against. It could be people specifically really within their industry and also company size and even better geography. So what you're trying to do is create a larger, more specific group of people or companies that you can list. That's step 1. And step 2 is you actually want to lean on a specific customer story and you want to center it around a problem. Because even if, one of the companies you mentioned, they're twice as big as us, they're actually international, we're not quite international, right? So it's kind of like a semi-fit. What you can do is focus on the problem. Because if you can describe the problem, or if you can describe the buyer's problem better than they can themselves, they'll automatically assume that you have the best solution. And so what you want them to do is, as you're telling the story, like, hey, hopefully it's the same title, they had the same problem, they were having the same challenges in trying to solve that problem, and here's how we helped. What will happen is your buyer will start to put themselves in your story's shoes, if you will, like the protagonist, right? So they'll start to see themselves and they'll have this like self-discovery of, hey, that actually sounds a lot like me, and I'm really interested in understanding how you can solve it. And so they'll lean in, and that's how you can really start to use social proof to get people much more interested.
I love that. Do you find that you have more success social proofing by listing out companies that compete directly in the same space? Or do you find companies that are similar in terms of culture, or maybe companies that are competing for candidates? Like, where is the sweet spot in terms of which companies I should list off?
That's a good question. So I would say look at kind of like you're doing is like characteristics of these companies, right? Like you want to be as specific as possible. So if someone competes directly, you know it resonates because they're solving the same problem for the market. The other one is, you can look at things like geography, other teams that are in Chicago. If you want to look at, they're also international, because that's a kind of a specific trait depending on where you're selling. And so I would say get as specific as you can, 5-6 traits if you have it, if you have a big enough client base. And then, like I said, dive into like the actual problem that you solve now.
Oh, that is awesome. Thank you so much for the tips. Super helpful. And you've definitely got my mind spinning on this. So that's what this is all about. So Devin, thank you again for taking the time. Thank you
Absolutely.
all for joining us for our sales assembly study break. Thank you to Vidyard for sponsoring the content, and we will see you next week.